Hey everyone, welcome back to TB Wrestling. This is my wrestling channel where I cover wrestling topics. If you're looking for my reaction channel where I react to entertainment topics, you can find that at Timothy Bates. Today we have episode 5 of the Tell Your Story podcast. And today we have Austin, one of the moderators for Cultaholic and a frequent guest on the Cultaholic Classic podcast. How are you doing today, Austin?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm doing great. So, well, we kind of first got acquainted when I joined the Cultaholic Discord. What was that? 2017, 2018 when that first launched?
Yeah, because Cultaholic's been going since 2017. So then the Discord was basically up and running once the channel launched. So probably since like October, November of 2017.
Yeah. So at the time, the Cultaholic Discord was probably about 20 or 30 people. It wasn't very big, and now it's probably up to 500 people.
It's hard to gauge it because like once the guys decided to let it open to everyone can get access to it, and it's not just exclusively for patrons. More and more people started joining to the point where it's hard to keep track. Like there's so many people.
Yeah, well, first, why don't you just tell us how you got into pro wrestling, like what you remember, like how you really got into the love of pro wrestling?
Okay. Well, my first actual experience with pro wrestling, like I have no memory of it, but my parents tell me all the time. I had family who was wrestling fans. Back during the Attitude Era, so around like 2000, 2001. So I was about like 3 or 4 years old. I have no recollection of this. Apparently, I was a huge fan of The Rock. I still am. I love Rock. I would go around the house doing his "if you smell" catchphrase with as much tongue wagging as you could possibly imagine. That's from amazing. A 3-year-old. So that was my first experience. I would watch like the pay-per-views or something or Raw on at a family member's house. I have no memory of it whatsoever. My first actual experience with pro wrestling, because back in like 2009, I was like, oh yeah, Rock used to be a wrestler. I want to see some of his clips because he's one of my favorite, probably just entertainers of all time. So I went back and watched some YouTube clips of him. I think the first clip I saw was an episode of SmackDown where Rock was going 3-on-1 against the NWO, and then Stone Cold Steve Austin made a return in Texas, so the crowd went crazy, and I just heard them saying Austin. I'm like, there's a guy named Austin? What? I'm so confused. I'm like, holy hell. And and then I was like, man, this stuff is crazy. I want to see what they're doing nowadays. And my first match that I ever watched legitimately was, and it's the worst possible introduction you could possibly get, it was a WWE CW match from 2009 between Goldust and a debuting Sheamus. So like he was just starting to get pushed. So it was like the worst possible match I could have started with, because I was like, wait, am I supposed to cheer for the guy with the face paint and the gold and black bodysuit, or am I supposed to cheer for the Irish dude who's paler than you could imagine? So, but then I just started watching Raw a little bit, watching SmackDown, and just started going from that point on. And I was consistently watching until like about 2013 or 2012 when I sort of fell off. And then the guys from Cultaholic back when they were in WhatCulture really reinvigorated my love of professional wrestling. And that's why I'm so grateful for everything they've done, because I probably would. It could have been just a fad for me, like it is for a lot of people. But if it wasn't for them reinvigorating it with their super funny reactions and videos and news and just booking stuff and all this kind of stuff, like it really reinvigorated my love, and I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah. So I know just from just like what we've talked about in the scene, you're probably one of the biggest like AEW fans. Just like when AEW came out, I know you went to every show. You were so hyped about that. What about AEW was so intriguing for you as a fan when it first started?
Well, because as a wrestling fan, like everyone talked about the Monday Night Wars and how that was like a lot of people's golden eras for professional wrestling. And WWE was in a point where they were really just kicking stones and like were just doing whatever they felt like they were doing. There wasn't a ton of like connection with the fans. Like last time I could think that the fans and WWE really got along was when Daniel Bryan won the WWE World Heavyweight title at Mania 30. That was the last time I could have remembered at that point where the WWE and the fans were like kind of in an agreement, even though the fans backed WWE into a corner with that one. Mm-hmm. It felt like WWE was booking stuff that they wanted to see, but not necessarily what the fans wanted to see. And there was a huge disconnect, and heads were butting between the IWC and Vince and creative and all that kind of stuff. And it was just getting to a point where it was just getting hard to watch. Like, I remember there was points where I would just, like, go a few weeks without watching. And then I'd come back and I'd be like, I mean, like, because once you miss that first episode, it's so easy to just get into a run of just missing Raws or missing SmackDowns. But when AEW launched and they were – because I had started to really get into outside wrestling. So I started watching New Japan and Ring of Honor and PWG stuff and all these kind of stuff, Progress. So I was really trying to look at more wrestling outside of WWE because for the longest time, I was just a pure WWE mark who didn't really look outside of anything else. And I realized there's more, like, in terms of wrestling. And fell in love with Kenny Omega. I loved watching the Young Bucks with their crazy stuff. Cody, when I saw Cody at Defiant or WCPW, and then I saw him move on to Ring of Honor, and I was like, how did WWE let this dude go? This dude is like killing it. And I'm like, because when I first saw him, he was in Legacy, and I was like, I didn't think nothing of him. And then I see this, and I'm like, wait, he had this the whole time and was never shown any of this on WWE? So then when they announced AEW and they were actually doing it, I was like, oh my God. Like, and then they announced they were on TNT, and I'm like, this is serious. Like, this is something that we haven't seen in years. And I just, like, all the guys and girls they were bringing on board, I was like, I like him, I like him, I like her, I like her. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, this is insane. And especially going to All In was the moment where I was like, yeah, I'm with these guys, because that show was such a fucking crazy experience itself, because it was just one of the most important independent wrestling shows you'd ever seen. And just the connection they made with the fans and just the moments that were created that night and how much talent was there and how, like, everybody got to shine on that night. There wasn't a single guy or girl who didn't have a shining moment on that show, I felt like. And I just felt reinvigorated just seeing, like, how fun and how unbelievably incredible pro wrestling can be when it's at its best. Yeah. Because with WWE, you have to sift through a lot. And AEW felt like I was sifting through less. There's still stuff you got to sift through a little bit. That's with any promotion. But with AEW, I just felt way more of a connection to these guys. And being able to meet a lot of them and talk to a lot of them, go to meet and greets and stuff and interview a lot of them was a huge thing that when I was like, I felt a better connection to these guys than I did, say, any other pro wrestler from WWE. But yeah, I haven't been to every show. I didn't go to Fyter Fest. I didn't go to Fight for the Fallen. I've been to, I haven't been to a Dynamite because I haven't come to Michigan, even though they need to. All In, Double or Nothing, All Out, and Revolution were all the shows that I've been to.
Yeah, so one thing I've definitely noticed with AEW, I was able to go to a Dynamite taping in Cleveland when they came. And I think the thing, and I've been to a couple WWE shows. I went to WWE pay-per-view. I've been to a house show. And the one thing I really felt when I went is that I could never tell when the commercials were, because they really they made it a fan experience as well as a television experience. I don't know if you felt that for the pay-per-view, AEW pay-per-views that you've went, that it really was as much for the fans as it was for television.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you feel like the fans aren't, like, being treated as children, sort of, because there are so many times where, like, pro wrestling and any kind of entertainment, like a company or someone could just be like spoon feeding you something that you're kind of like, okay, I understand. Like when Jinder Mahal was getting his mega push for the WWE title, we were getting spoon fed this thing that Jinder was like just this hot shit. I have no idea if I can curse on here or not.
Yeah, you're totally fine.
Okay, cool. I should have asked you that before. But we were getting spoon-fed this thing that, like, Jinder Mahal was the hottest thing since sliced bread, even though for years he's been a jobber, and we remember this kind of stuff. But that was getting all pushed to the wayside to push forward this new storyline, and we were just expected to forget about it. But that wasn't the case with a lot of these. Like, so many things are being, like, like held on, and like stuff felt like it was being like really pushed for. And like I think a great example was just the month-long, almost year-long build to when MJF eventually turned on Cody. Like we
Yeah, that
all
was
knew it was
awesome.
coming, but that moment of when it was coming, we always just kept guessing and guessing and guessing. I swore he was going to turn it all out, and when he was facing Shawn Spears.
Yeah.
But when he turned on Cody for the AEW title, and like just the way he did it was just a way. It was a great payoff to a moment that was very easy to see coming. But the way they pulled it off was in a way that was entertaining, and it wasn't felt like you're like, oh, is he gonna turn? And it felt like we weren't being treated like children. And I think the biggest thing is just the respect for the audience. I feel like AEW has a lot more respect for the wrestling fan base, because WWE tries to cater to a more modern audience, cater to a more like commercial audience, a more just casual audience. That's just why they do the things they do. They're the biggest company in the world. They want to get the most eyes on the product. There's a lot of wrestling fans in the world, but they're going to get them no matter what. They're trying to get people that they're not normally going to get, which is fine. But you're going to piss off the people that are already watching your show. And like, you kind of want to keep those guys around because you get them to go, and you're struggling getting casual fans. You're going to be struggling for viewership. Anyway, we're seeing that with NXT. I mean, like NXT's great, but like just a better respect for the audience just really goes a long way in making people want to stick with you. And that's just the way that AEW's really help make their fans feel like a community, which is really important.
And I definitely agree with you with the Jinder Mahal thing. The thing is, I was like 2 months in as a fan, so I knew nothing about his background. So I was like, oh, this guy's hot. I'm so excited. And then I started looking into it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this guy's really awful. And so, like, I understand why so many people fell off at that point. So, yeah, that's really funny to hear, because I had no idea that he came out of nowhere at the time. I thought this was a guy who was always near the top, and I had no idea. So for All Elite, one thing I do like is that they've brought in people who I'd never heard of, but that are now, I feel like, really big stars. Who are a couple of their wrestlers that you hadn't heard of prior to them joining AEW that you really think have done a great job really getting themselves into the fans' heads?
Riho's definitely one. I think nobody would have thought anything of Riho, but she just got such a great response from the fans, and just that people fell in love with her. Going on the complete opposite side of that, you can't not say MJF. Whether you're happy about it or you're not, dude got the opportunity of a lifetime with this whole thing, and he's seized every chance he can to make the most out of the time that he has. And that's just kind of the mindset you have to have with anything that you do. It's like you have something that you have the chance to really make special, so you do everything you can to make the most of your time. I remember when I was at All In, and we had the chance to do our podcast for Podcast Movement. They had a stage in the room in the hotel lobby at Starcast, and we were just talking about Double or Nothing. I mean, talking about All In, giving our predictions and stuff. Wrestlers were going down the line, signing autographs and stuff. And then we just look over to the side, and MJF's just kind of just mean mugging us. And we just kind of slightly interact with him. And eventually he just walks on stage. I give up my seat so he can take my spot. And then all of a sudden he just starts shooting the shit at us.
That's hilarious.
And just completely digging us a ditch and being like, how does it feel to be the worst podcast ever? It's like, doesn't that feel great, guys? You're the worst at something, or something, and stuff along the lines of that. And just like, we were nobodies. Like there was no reason he needed to come up there. Like if it was with Busted Open or like anything like that, or the WhatCulture guys, it would have been completely understandable. We were nobodies from Michigan. He had no reason to come up and do that. So
that's awesome.
Just that, like there, he was just in front of like maybe 40 people or 50 people that were waiting in line for a meet and greet, and they were just kind of just talking. Like this guy takes everything he can and legitimately makes everything work for it. Whether you like it or not is regardless. The dude's getting attention, and I mean, he's done everything possible to make the most out of that. Yeah, and if there was one other person I could say that has really made the most that people probably didn't know about. I would honestly say Darby Allin. Darby Allin by far, because he's got that like underground hardcore, just people just like want to root for this guy, underdog mentality. He's just basically he's punk rock in a sense. Like I feel like people have a connection to him, like that they had to see him Punk back when he was not a meme and not like everybody hated his guts or yada yada yada, and he was still wrestling. So I mean, just the responses he gets are huge, and he's by far one of those guys. So I would say those three guys are the ones I can name off the top of my head who have really taken this chance with this new medium and really ran with it.
So tomorrow is Double or Nothing again. Unfortunately, it's not going to be as spectacularly as you would expect from AEW with their pay-per-views, but I still think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the biggest question, at least on my mind, is the casino ladder match. I'm really excited for that. And in my head, I have honestly no idea who's winning or who's going to be the special person. Do you have any idea who you think the mystery opponent will be? And if so, who will win that match?
I'm not too creative in terms of that. I just said Drew Gulak. I was just like, I mean,
that's what I've been hearing too.
He wanted out of his contract. He got out of it. Like he ran it out and then just walked away. He wasn't one of the guys that just straight up got released. He wanted out very much so. So if there was anybody who like could do that, it would be him. I'm not creative in thinking outside the box of that, of just any other guys. But yeah, that's the thing too about that Casino Battle Royale is that there's so much talent there, and it feels like a good amount of them have been given a good like shot in the where it's like, oh, I could see him winning or him winning or him winning and him winning. That's how you really build a strong mid card, because when you build a strong mid card of guys that can go for your secondary title, and like it's at the point where like you really don't know who. That's how you make that area exciting. Yeah. And there's so much talent there that like the point of seeing one of those guys jump up to the main title picture is like another whole thing in the same thing. So I think I picked Darby just because he's been so white hot, and I feel like they might want to try to stick a title on him. But other than that, I couldn't think of like a solid, and I'm still not 100% about that. But yeah, that by far is probably one of the more exciting ones that I think people are going to be looking forward to. But yeah, it's gonna be a great show for sure, despite the circumstances.
Yeah. So another thing that I've been curious is when they announced the AEW TNT title, I think a lot of people are like, okay, so this is like their Intercontinental belt. This is their mid-card title, which I think for some people was a surprise that they decided to go with Cody versus Lance Archer in it, which maybe for some seems like they're maybe bigger than that title. Are you at all surprised that that's the direction that they went for that title?
I don't think so, really, because, I mean, they already shot down Cody for the main title. And I think the big thing, I mean, like, you look at the secondary titles in WWE, like, and you think about the moments where those titles really meant the most. You look at something like John Cena with the United States title. That title really started to mean something when he brought out his open challenge. And I feel like they're kind of sort of looking around that sort of area, and especially with Cody going for it. Because if you have a big top guy going for a mid-card title and making it seem like people should, they're really trying to sell the fact that this title means something and it should mean something. And despite it not being the main title, this is still something that when people get it, it's going to be like a holy shit moment. And I think that just, it seems basically like, I mean, it's like sort of that sort of thing where it's just like, you want to make sure people care about that title. So I'm not really surprised in the sense of Cody going for it, and then bringing in Mike Tyson again just helps elevate that even more. Just being like, hey guys, this new thing, yeah, you should pay attention to this thing because cool stuff is going to come for people going after this. Because you look at the U.S. title right now, it's like, who the fuck even cares? Like, you can't even I bet if you like asked like maybe 20 wrestling fans, well, who is the United States Championship? Who is the United States champion? Probably like
it's 5. Andrade, right?
I don't even know, dude. I don't even know. You know what? Here's what we'll do.
I'm not even quite sure about that.
Exactly. I'm going to look it up right now to see who's the current title holder. Current title champion right now is, it is Andrade. Yep. So
But again, I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like, I mean, like, no disrespect to Andrade. I think he's great, but just when you don't make your titles feel exemplary and you don't make them feel like they mean anything, fans tend to just forget about them or
Yeah.
just like not pay attention, because you need to make sure every single one of your champions means something. They've done that with the tag titles with Hangman and Omega. They've done that with the women's title now held by Nyla, and when it was held by Riho. They did that. Now they're going to do it with they did it with their main title because of course they did, with Jericho being the first champion, and then now they're going to do it with this one.
I personally, I feel like I'm in the minority where I feel like AEW's women's division actually, I think it did start rocky, but I think now it's really good. I feel like we're starting to get to know them more. Do you have the same opinion that the AEW's women's division is actually pretty underrated in terms of the people that they have?
Yeah, totally. Because I think you're definitely right. It was at a point where like it was kind of like iffy. Because like I think most people could name Britt Baker, why am I B Priestley? You can name her. That's probably like I'm
And
sure
maybe
I'm
Awesome Kong.
Awesome Kong, yeah, of course. But like I said, like they had a lot of Japanese women's wrestlers that a lot of people didn't know. But the thing is, they made you care. Like Riho, instantaneously, like they started going with her, and fans fell in love with her. And me personally, I fucking love Hikaru Shida.
Me too. She's awesome.
I think she's so good, and like they did a really good job of building her up. There's just, and like I said, like with Nyla, they've done a great job with her. They've really made her feel super special. Brandy's great just because she's Brandy. Though I wasn't a massive fan of the Nightmare Collective. I'm glad they kind of dropped that when they did, because it felt very much like Ring of Honor, Velvet Sky kind of stuff. And I was like, kind of move away from that. We don't need to go down this thing. Like, it was a good try.
Especially with Brandy being part of the Nightmare family. It just felt very weird that Cody's just like big baby face, and then Brandy, who everyone knows is Cody's wife, is like part of this cult.
If one's going to turn heel, both has to turn heel. It just makes the most sense that way. But yeah, and Britt, obviously, like people knew her from All In and stuff and other promotions, but I think she really started to come into her own, and she's also shown herself to be a great heel. She's done really well in that position as well. And then, yeah, there's so much talent on that roster. Chris Statlander, like she's done really well. You give a character like she's an alien, and just she's somehow done really, really well with that. Like that takes a lot of talent. It really does. And I think the issue is like there's so much women's talent nowadays, like the Four Horsewomen, Asuka, all these girls and who are so talented. You just look in all different promotions. I personally feel like it is very underrated, but I can understand people being like, well, I feel like this women's division is a lot stronger. I totally get that though. But the thing is, though, it's a good thing that we're having that discussion, because back a few years ago, we wouldn't give a shit about the women's division in any promotion except for maybe TNA, because they were doing really good with the knockouts. Yeah. But before that, nobody gave a damn. Like you go back to the mid 2000s. Who were your favorite women's wrestlers? Oh, Lita and Trish. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like, but we're at a point now where we can have these discussions of promotions. Who has the better women's division? Like who has the most talent for their women's division? That's a good problem to have in 2020, because
absolutely
it makes it seem like it's like they're on par. That's what we're supposed to be aiming for women's wrestling. And I'm glad that we've gotten to that point where a sense of equality in that sense is really starting to come forth in our wrestling, because it's been long overdue.
It's no longer embarrassing to be watching a women's match where, you know, you could be watching and it's basically just, you know, sex on stage where it's just girls having a cat fight. And that's embarrassing if you have someone come in. But if someone comes in and you see two strong women having a wrestling match, you're like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's the same thing with UFC.
Awesome.
Same thing with UFC. Exactly. It's literally the same thing. You don't feel like you're going to be disowned by your family if you see a bra and panties match or a mud match or whatever the hell they called those things. So it's great. It really is.
Yeah. If you were given the keys to the AEW kingdom and you could make one adjustment to their current product, what would you change?
If I can make one change. Oh.
And none is an okay answer.
Make me an announcer. That's my change I'd make. Hire
Perfect.
me. That's what I'd say.
Perfect.
But if I'm being legit, I would say probably I guess I would say yeah, it's really tough because there's a lot of stuff there that I feel is pretty rock solid. Um, if I had to change one thing, I would probably say I want to see Best Friends get a real title push because I think they are so good. And like I think the one thing, like they have Orange Cassidy obviously to really make them feel big because so many people love him or hate him, and I feel like they're at a point where they should really get a shot and a legit shot. So, and I think Hangman and Kenny have done a great job with those tag titles. I think it's time for a tag team that's been established for a very long time to really take hold of those belts. And I think if there's any established tag team that you should go for, I think it should be Best Friends. There's a lot of good tag teams on there, but if I had to pick one that probably deserves a good push, I would say Best Friends.
So I know you and your sister were very involved in the WhatCulture, like live streams before they became Cultaholic. How did you and you from that gained a really great connection with those guys? How did that like connection come about?
I mean, it was just literally calling into the streams and just random occurrences. Like for people who don't know, WhatCulture back when all the guys were there, including Blampier, Pacitti, all of them, they did their extra thing, which in retrospect wasn't the best money decision because they didn't really have a lot of content to offer. And the bosses were just kind of like, we want to do this. And they're like, okay. And like, for people who still do they still do live streams for Raw and SmackDown, but like you can tell like it's hard to come up with stuff to say when Raw or SmackDown is a slog. So they're working with what they get. But the thing that really made those fun was just the ability to call in and talk with them because it added a real sense of community, a real connection that you were making with these guys. For some reason on the Raw streams, Jack and Adam Blampier were doing like this. They had this Cultaholic stream, Cultaholic. Or WhatCulture Extra Stream Championship belt that they were given to people who had good conversations, and then eventually it just spiraled out to people cutting promos on each other. And then like I did a cover of Wild and Young, the old NXT theme. And made Blampier pop like you wouldn't imagine with that whole thing because they were just singing it the whole time. It was weird. And I just called and talked with them a lot and had good conversations with them and cool little funny moments with them, enough to make an impact on them and for them to remember me and remember my sister. And that's when they reached out to us when Cultaholic was starting about being a mod.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, it means the world to me because I consider those guys pretty good friends of mine. Like I haven't had the chance to meet Pacitti yet, but I've met pretty much everybody else. I've met Matthew, Jack, Sam, Ross, and I'm really good friends with the American writer Justin Henry. I haven't met Tom, but I've talked with him many, many occasions. But yeah, I mean, it's a great connection to have, and it's just these guys are just really super talented, super funny, witty, and just really cool people. And it just, that connection just spanned of me calling in and supporting them and just having conversations and doing funny shit. And it was really random when you think about it. It was really much kind of like a right place, right time situation because that they could have given that mod position to anybody. And I'm very fortunate that I got that opportunity, and I do my best to try to be as helpful and the best mod that I could possibly be. So
yeah. Were you did you watch a lot of the WCPW stuff back when they did that?
Yeah, I did. Not there was a point where I was watching it consistently, and then kind of when they moved over to Define, I sort of slipped off because I was watching more and more. There's just so much wrestling out there that's hard to, one promotion's going to slip off and I'm going to miss a lot of good matches. So.
I kind of felt like WCPW had feels of like AEW maybe at the early stages where they were constantly getting these guys that everyone loved, but they were so into making the fans the number one like priority. And so I always kind of felt like WCPW kind of had a lot of what I think AEW has, maybe to like a lesser extent because it wasn't as big, but WCPW was definitely, especially with when they had their YouTube personalities prominently in the show. I always fell in love with just how much they seemed to connect with their fans and then bring in some really good talent.
Yeah, well, the thing that helped too was, again, this promotion was started by people that fans already knew. So the fans of WhatCulture already knew the guys that were starting it. They knew Blampier, they knew Bachidi, they knew Sam, they knew Jack, they knew all these guys, they knew Ross. And that was the thing that really helped them, because if it wasn't for them, they probably would have just been another British promotion. And that's fine, but the added publicity that they got with it being a already established YouTube channel helped get a lot of these guys the publicity that they probably hadn't had in a very long time. I guarantee you Martin Kirby didn't get the type of views that he did back until he was with WCPW. And that's just because that large YouTube audience through streaming was just a huge new way for these wrestlers to get their names out. Like Joseph Connors or Joe Hendry, all these guys that like all of a sudden people really started to be like, whoa, these guys are really good. And it's if it wasn't for the YouTube side of it, then it would have been just another promotion. So in a sense, it's got that AEW thing where it's like, established guys who people already know making their own promotion. So in a sense, it's very similar, but just the differences between them are YouTube personalities and former Ring of Honor and IWGP champions. So
yeah, definitely.
it's the same idea, just at a different scale. So I can totally get that point though.
Yeah. So where do you see like your wrestling journey continue? Are you looking to stay more involved in it as a fan, or do you ever see yourself trying to get involved maybe in like announcing or, other sides of the actual wrestling side of it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, my goal, I've recently just finished my college career and got my bachelor's degree in broadcast and cinematic arts and a minor in journalism. And I'm pursuing to try to get into sports broadcasting specifically so I can be a pro wrestling announcer. My goal has always been WWE commentator. That's just what I want to do, because I love so many other promotions, but you look at like pro wrestling in a sense, like when you want to get somewhere, WWE should be your main goal. It's like you aim for the top and you just keep building. So yeah, I mean, like I've always like it's my favorite thing to watch. So it's just the idea of just traveling, calling the stuff that I like the most doesn't seem like a job to me, and it seems like something that I can do pretty well, that I feel like I can improve at and help tell the story, because I have such a I think commentating is such an important thing that a lot of people may not pay too much attention to, because I know a lot of people, especially when they watch Raw or SmackDown, tend to just mute the TV because they just can't stand Michael Cole, or they watch Impact and they can't stand Josh Matthews and all these kind of things. And like, that's when you're doing it wrong, when people are just like, they don't want to hear you. Your job is to make people care about the story, because what's happening in the ring. And it's feel like when it's done well, people remember these things. You look at Jim Ross, you look at Gorilla Monsoon, and even Vince at certain points, the boyhood dream has just come true. All these guys had these moments, and even people give Cole so much shit. I've given Cole a lot of shit, but when he's good, he does a good job, and he still does a really good job of making things feel big. And it's just, I feel like that's like, I want to try to aim for that kind of lineage, because I love this business. I love this product. I love everything about pro wrestling, and I can't contribute to it in a physical sense because I'm just not that kind of person, but I can contribute it to helping promote it and sell it and just call what's happening, whether it be on commentary, whether it be announcing, doesn't matter. I just want to be able to be a part of this whole thing, because it's one of the things that is the most important to me.
Yeah. I know you've been to some huge events. I know you've been to WrestleManias. I know pretty sure you went to the New Japan Ring of Honor show at the Garden.
Mm-hmm.
You've been to takeovers, obviously AEW shows. What is your all-time like favorite moment that you were in attendance for?
The all-time,
You can list a couple if that'd be easier.
I'll do a couple because it's kind of hard to rank the best because I've been to some crazy shows and had some crazy experiences. Like I've been to, like you said, I've been to takeovers and I've been to All In, New Japan. And I went to G1 Supercard at the Garden, which was the first time I've ever been to Madison Square Garden, which is an unbelievable arena. And I'm so glad that I finally got to go to that because I've always wanted to. If I had to say some of my favorites, because I went to WrestleMania 34 at the Superdome in New Orleans, and I got to see The Undertaker. And, probably his, besides the Boneyard match, probably his best Mania match he had since, his match, the end of an era match. That was probably his best Mania match he had since the end of the era because it didn't show any of his weaknesses, and it made Undertaker seem like a legit thing because he squashed John Cena.
Yeah.
So it was great, and it was just when you see that entrance live, there's nothing like it. Like I was convinced after Mania 33 we'd never see the Undertaker again. So when the Mania I got to go to, I got to see that entrance that most people thought we'd never see that again. We'd never seen Taker in that build to that match with Cena. So when he showed up, it was huge. And it's still one of the most insane things I've ever experienced. I got to see the Dustin Cody match, which people bawled over. It was insane. I got to see NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3 where Adam Cole and the Undisputed Era debuted. I got to see NXT TakeOver New Orleans when Roderick Strong joined the Undisputed Era and that unbelievable unsanctioned match between Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, which to this day is one of my favorite matches. Yeah. It's just so good. I got to see Jon Moxley debut at Double or Nothing. I got to see all these insane things. I got to see the insane Escalera de la Muertes match at All Out. It's too many to name. I've been really lucky with the shows that I've been able to attend. So those are the ones I can name off the top of my head. But yeah, I've been very fortunate with the matches and the shows that I've been able to see live. So those are the ones I can name off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, definitely. For pro wrestling, what do you think? Because I think one thing pro wrestling's definitely maybe struggled with is getting new fans. I feel like it's hard enough keeping the fans that you have, but I think it's even harder to get new fans. What do you think pro wrestling needs to do to be able to bring in a new generation of fans?
I mean, you just look at it and you see all these people who stepped out of professional wrestling when The Rock left or Stone Cold Steve Austin retired or all these people that were around when Hulk Hogan was around. You look at those areas and the one thing that sticks across that whole thing is those characters felt larger than life. They felt like legitimate superheroes that were fighting for your entertainment. I love a ton of guys that are wrestling in WWE and AEW and all these other promotions. You have very few guys that feel larger than life. It's like you have John Cena, you have Randy Orton, you have Triple H, you have The Undertaker, and then it's kind of like a toss-up because you show a wrestling fan somebody like, say, Ricochet, who I think has the potential to be somebody that could carry a company. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to just hot shot that guy straight to the main event picture because the things he can do is something that nobody else can.
Yeah.
So if you want somebody to seem larger than life, they literally call him the one and only. You take advantage of that. You give that guy a push and have him take down some Goliath and make him seem fucking insane and have him put on those matches like he did with Will Ospreay. Give him the freedom to do that. I think the thing that's holding WWE back is just a lot of it's so overly scripted. It's so overly everyone's got their hands in everything. Everybody wants to feel like they're involved. with something, and specifically with creative writing, booking, all this kind of stuff. Everyone wants to feel like they got involved so they can pat themselves on the back and be like, I did that. I made that happen. But most of the time, what they made happen was garbage. So you just let these guys do what they know how to do, and they can make connections with an audience. That's the biggest thing in professional wrestling, is making a connection. Because I guarantee you, if I took a guy, somebody who never watched pro wrestling and put them in front of, say, like a Cody promo or an MJF promo, or say a Moxley promo, or a CM Punk promo, or a John Cena promo when he's not given like a bunch of jokes to say, or all this kind of stuff, or a Rock promo, a Stone Cold Steve Austin promo. You put somebody in front of those who've never seen pro wrestling, they will connect with those people because they sound like they are exactly who they are in that ring as they are when they leave. Like, they seem like just the most unbelievably entertaining and charismatic people. So just stop feeling like you need to lumber these guys with, you have to say this word for word or you're stupid or we won't let you go on TV. Yeah. Stop with this whole mindset that wrestling fans are stupid. Stop with this whole mindset that you have to cater to the lowest common denominator in order to get people to pay attention. Focus on the mindset that, like, if you get a character that people connect with and like people can care about, like, you look at the growth of Marvel. A lot of people who watch MCU movies probably never read a comic in their life. I haven't read many comics, but I still connect with those characters because they're built properly and they're people, you connect with them in a certain way. So you just need to treat these wrestlers, and these wrestlers know who their characters are supposed to be. Giving them a writer who writes generic babyface and generic heel promos doesn't help expand their character. It stagnates everybody. So give every wrestler who's built a career of trying to figure out who they are and let them go. Because if they screw up, it's their ass. That's it. And like, you can just, like, there you go. You don't get, that's your shot, whatever. Because they love that mindset of like grabbing that brass ring or taking that ruthless aggression to make something happen, or whatever buzzword they wanted to use to make their era seem specific and wanting to motivate their guys. When you're writing for them and when you're doing all this stuff to like shut them down and not let them be creative, you're making it so much harder for fans to care. Just let them do their jobs. They've spent years learning how to do their jobs. Stop trying to take that job away just so you can give yourself brownie points and be like, I wrote that line, and show like your two friends who could probably do your job better than you, I wrote that line, and then they just walk out of your house.
Yeah. So this is a very cliche question, but I'm always interested in knowing who's on your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling?
Okay. If we're talking like, I'm not going to talk like technical or the best wrestler, because I feel like everybody has like that's what people try to do. I'm going to go with the Mount Rushmore of like my favorite wrestlers.
Perfect.
They may not be the best at wrestling. They may not be the best at one certain thing. They just connected with me in a specific way. So I would put CM Punk, because that guy got me to care about wrestling for the first time in a very long time when he cut that pipe bomb promo. And the dude is just, he's one of my idols. I'm straight edge because I found out that he was. And I just thought, that's so cool. I want to do that. And I just felt like that was a connection that he made with me to just do that kind of stuff. And like, the dude didn't give a shit about what anybody else thought. He did what he thought was right. He did what he felt was the best for him. And most of the time, it ended up perfectly. His match with Undertaker, his stuff from Ring of Honor, his stuff when he was on his hottest heat wave you could imagine with Summer of Punk before they shut it down like fucking assholes. Like, just the guy knew who he was, and he just did everything to the best of his ability. And you couldn't help, like, if you look back at his stuff, even if you're the biggest CM Punk hater or whatever, you look back at some of his old stuff and you can't tell me you can't see that guy has talent, whether it be in wrestling, whether it be in talking and promos or whatever. The dude is good. He was really good. He went to UFC. He got his ass kicked. but he did it. Nobody even thought he was going to step in the octagon in the first place in his first match, and he still did it. And like, you do things for yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing that I took away from being a fan of him, was just, you do things for yourself. And as long as you make yourself proud, fuck whoever wants to throw shit. It doesn't matter, because you made yourself happy. You made the people that care about you happy. That's all your life should be focused about. Who cares what other people think? They don't know who you are. So that's why he connected with me. He gave me one of my favorite matches of all time in John Cena versus CM Punk and Money in the Bank and in Chicago. I love that match. And he's just fucking awesome. I love him so much. I would put Rock, like most people would. I mean, the dude's unbelievably to actual culture. So the dude just does everything so well. So I mean, it's almost impossible not to put him up there, because he's just so freaking good. And then I would put Stone Cold Steve Austin, because he changed the game. He ushered in a completely new era. People don't like Cena. That guy, I've never seen like somebody who has worked harder in the face of adversity ever. I got into wrestling in 2009, and it was right around the time when Cena was just, you couldn't stop him. He was in his unending feud with Randy Orton. I first saw him in SummerSlam 2009 when he faced Randy Orton, the match that restarted over and over and over and over again. So, but I mean, the guy just seems like the most genuine person, and he's not the best wrestler, not even by a long shot, but he can make you care about a match so instantaneously, whether you want to see him get his ass kicked or whether you want to see him rise above hate or whatever. He strikes me as one of the hardest working people that you will ever find. I watched his documentary that he did for the Ruthless Aggression era, and every interview that I've ever seen him do, every fan interaction I've ever seen him do, all the Make-A-Wishes that he's ever done, he's just a stand-up guy. You may not like his character because it's stagnant and it doesn't change, and it's understandable because they don't want to change something that is working so well. And we may want something creatively different, but in terms of, like, that would be like if they made Superman evil. It's just, it doesn't work. I mean, we might find it interesting and be like, yeah. Just imagine how much that would turn off casual fans that are just still clinging on to dear life to still watching because John Cena's on TV.
Yeah.
As much as people want to give him shit, like, the dude just, every time he goes out there, he does everything in his power to make something work. And it doesn't work every time. When he squashed the Nexus, I thought it was the stupidest fucking thing ever. When he buried Wade Barrett at TLC, I thought it was ridiculous. Not everything he does is perfect, but the connection he makes with fans is something that very few people have. And I think that's a really important thing to have as a wrestler. So those are my four that I can name.
Yeah. What is your biggest controversial wrestling opinion?
Ooh, let's see. My biggest controversial. I think I don't know if it's necessarily controversial, but I think beach balls are the bane of pro wrestling, or fans that chant, "We are awesome." I fucking hate that. I think it's so egotistical, and like the fact that you're trying to make the show about you. Another thing too is that I've met a couple of these people and they seem like pretty nice people. I hate fans that try to get themselves over as like a character.
Yeah.
So like Brock Lesnar guy, or the guy who wears the awful white jacket with the Raw and SmackDown logos on the side, green shirt guy who always sits in front row, Frank the Clown, any of these wrestling fans who feel the need to get themselves over and make themselves seem bigger than they actually are. It annoys the hell out of me because the show is not about you. It's not. It's about the guys who are in the ring. And yes, the fans have a huge presence in pro wrestling, but for you to make yourself try to stand out, I think is super egotistical. And I just don't care for it. And like, I feel like, because I've had the chance to be floor seat hard cam for a pro wrestling show of a big thing. I was hard cam floor seat for All Out, and that was huge for me because I was like, oh my god, like I'm like, dude, there I am. I'm literally there for the entire show, and like I thought, and I had like one of the best views of the show, and I think that's amazing. I think I want like all wrestling fans to experience that, because I think it's one of the coolest things to be on hard cam, because it's just such a rare thing. But when you see the same 5 guys in the hard cam sitting in their same seats, it's just like you get jealous, because you're like, well, you have money. That's great. Like, give
Yeah.
somebody else a shot. Like, come on. You can miss one Raw at hard cam. Let somebody else get that seat. Like, stop wearing the same shit to every show so people know. If they weren't wearing the same shit, I wouldn't care. But they're wearing the same shit every time they come to a
It's
show.
like that Marlins guy who used to show up to like every sports event wearing the Miami Marlins jersey.
Exactly.
For like
And
years.
it's just like, come on, dude. Like, you're trying to get yourself over, and like, if something happens organically, like Brock Lesnar guy happened organically, it was just a good cut. Angry Miz girl happened organically because it was just a good cut. Shocked Undertaker streak ending guy happened because it was a great cut. That's fine, but like, it's when you want to try to. I mean, I get trying to capitalize on stuff. I don't know. I don't. It's just a personal thing. I just really don't like it. And beach balls, I think, are so fucking annoying. I was at the SummerSlam where Cesaro went out into the crowd and tore a beach ball apart, and I popped so loud, but not for the reason that everybody else was. Everyone else was popping because, oh my God, he noticed the beach ball. I popped because, yes, get that pissing thing out of the crowd and have people focus on the match. Because you have people like Seth Rollins and Cesaro in that match, and you don't give a shit. You're hitting beach balls. Like, come on, man. It's just so annoying, because people pay so much money to go to these shows and just act like jackasses.
Yeah. So there's just a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're back on. So is there anything else that you really wanted to cover about your love for pro wrestling that we haven't already?
I guess just the fact that I've gotten, like, pro wrestling has offered me so many cool opportunities in pursuing what I want to do. And because it really pushed to be what I wanted my career to be around. Because for a long time, I didn't know necessarily what I wanted to do. Like, I had things like music and all these kind of things that I was trying to get into, and trying to find different job avenues and what I wanted to do. And I knew I liked entertainment, I knew I liked sports, and I knew I liked wrestling. But like, the more and more I got into like just like looking at commentators and like stuff like that, was when I really knew that I wanted to do that. And being a fan, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of unbelievably crazy cool things just by some crazy chance stuff. So Starcast 1, I paid to do to call a match with Kevin Kelly, specifically Omega Okada 4. So I paid to do that, and I got to tell him, like, hey, this is really what I want to do with my life. So I'd love to hear what you think after we do this. And he was like, yeah, totally. We'll give it a shot. And we called the match, and I did it. And he was like, okay, like, and this was back in I want to say,
like 2018, I think.
Yeah, it was back in 2018 when All In happened, I believe. So he was like, okay, so are you in, after we finished the match and called it, which I still have recorded on my phone, he was like, okay, are you in college? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, you're studying sports broadcasting? I'm like, yeah, broadcast cinematic arts. He's like, okay, you can do this. And just started really telling me a lot of great tips on how to improve the way I call a match. And the one saying that you can do this, somebody like Kevin Kelly, who's the lead English commentator for New Japan, has been in WWE for years, having somebody like that say you can do this is so, like, it means more than you could imagine. So I was literally, I could have gotten hit by a bus and I wouldn't have cared. So the thing too is that he literally gave me great advice. He wasn't just like, oh yeah, man, you did great. That's great. He actually gave me helping advice, because if he just said great, then that's fine, but I don't know what I could have done better. Yeah. But he actually told me stuff to improve, which I still take to heart. Mm-hmm. And it was unbelievably helpful. That same Starcast, I also signed up to do a call match with Ian Riccaboni from Ring of Honor. He ended up having to catch a flight, and I was the last guy there, and he had to cut it short. And he was like, bro, I'm so sorry. Like, I was just like, oh man, that's all right, man. It's no big deal. It's like, we'll find some other, like, some other time, like some other show, we'll figure something out or whatnot. It's like, whatever. It's like, and like, I'll probably see him down the road. I'm a wrestling fan. I'm going to come to Ring of Honor shows and stuff. So I can say hi or whatever and just whatnot. So he took a picture with me. He signed me a couple of autographs, and then he left. And then he tweeted out that, because somebody was like, oh man, you were super cool at StarCast. It was so cool how you got to meet with everybody. And then he tweeted how there was one guy who he couldn't meet, and it was the guy who wanted to do commentating for the rest of his life. And he was like, missing him, like I literally couldn't. He was like, I felt so terrible. And he was like, Austin, if you're reading this tweet, like, reach out, like, we'll figure something out. And I was like, holy shit, he remembered me. And I was like, that's insane. And like, actually did a call out being like, yo, if you're seeing this, like, whatever, like, let me know. And I was like, yo, man, this is so cool. Like next time for sure. I just said. And then he followed me on Twitter, and then we just started DMing about trying to set up a time to do this match. And then when I went to G1 Supercard at MSG, I also went to the Supercard of Honor, like, meet and greet stuff. And Ian was there, and I was just like, hey, bro, I'm here. Do you want to meet up? And he was like, yeah, sure. I just got to finish this stuff on stage, and then I'll come and see you. And I ran into him. I was like, hey, man, how you doing? He was like, yeah. And then we quickly realized we have no technology or anything to actually call a match together. So I was like, that's fine. Can I just pick your brain a little bit? Can I just like learn from you? Like, I want to learn. So like, we went off to the side, and we just started talking about just his history in commentating, what he's learned, the stuff that he's experienced, tips that he felt I should know, stories, all this kind of stuff. He talked for me for a good 15 minutes. The whole time, too, a couple fans stopped to take a picture with him, and he was totally cool about it. And he still has my contact, and he still follows me on Twitter. I got to do a quick little interview with Tamatanga at the Bullet Club block party, which is more like a work interview. Like, I was pretending to be like an actual pro wrestling announcer, work kayfabe sort of a little bit. It wasn't like an actual like podcast interview, because I had like 3 minutes. So I'm like, I'm going to turn this into a kayfabe interview because this is what I want to do. So whatever. And I sent that over to Ian, who also critiqued it really well. And Tama also, after I did that, was like, that was good. And I was like, you're like an unbelievable promo and a talker. So you saying that's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I've like, it's like those kind of experiences are just such a random, insane thing that's happened to me. And I'm so fortunate and so lucky that those things have happened to me, and has really improved my chances of trying to accomplish this dream that I had. Like, also, when we were in New Orleans for WrestleMania 34, my parents were out on Bourbon Street, and we're just walking around, and we were at Takeover, and they were just walking around. They went to a bar, and they saw camera guys from WWE setting up, because they had heard a wrestler was going to perform at this bar. And my mom was like, let it be The Rock, let it be The Rock, let it be The Rock. And they came over and asked this one producer and was like, hey, we hear a wrestler's going to be here. Who is it going to, because I'm thinking it's going to be The Rock. Who is it? And he just looks at her and goes, it's Elias. Yeah. And she's just like, damn it. And it's just like, they started talking to him, and my parents told him that like I wanted to work for WWE as a commentator. And he was like, oh, okay, here's my card. Have him get in contact with me. We'll try to make something work. I'm still in contact with that guy right now, who's still trying to help me get my foot in the door. He's done he's done a ton to help me out and just kind of bypass the whole application bullshit, whatever. And that was completely spur of the moment too. It like just random insane circumstances that have happened to me, and like all these things that have happened to me, like it just shows to me that I need to do this, because I've put so much into trying to make this happen. Years of college, years of study, years of just going to wrestling shows, learning, and just stuff from commentators, all this kind of stuff. And it's just kind of like that sort of thing where you're like, you start to realize that, oh yeah, this is what I'm meant to do on this earth. And I'm not going to let this pass up. So eventually I'm going to bust my ass to the point where I get to that point. And it's going to be one of the hardest things I ever try to do, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. So that's my goal in life.
Yeah. So do you have anything that you want to promote before we end this? I know you're working. You said you're working on stuff with Cultaholic Classic Podcast.
Yeah. The Cultaholic Classic Raw review. I have joined on. I was a guest a couple times on the show, but now I'm their sort of musical guest as a Strummerwitz. I do like parody songs and like little comedy songs about like super folky, super poppy, but it's talking about stuff that's happening in new generation era pro wrestling. So it's quite funny and ridiculous. So I've been doing it for a few weeks now. If you listen to the episodes, you'll hear me at the end of every episode. Be sure to check that out. Check out the Cultaholic guys. Obviously, those guys have given me a lot of opportunities, and I feel it owed to them for all the opportunities they've given me. Be sure to support those guys because they do great stuff. Every single one of them. Um, if you want to follow me on social, my Twitter is szoomer4. So SZOOMER4. I have a YouTube channel where I post music covers and music reactions. It's just my full name, Austin Szumowicz, SZUMOWICZ. You probably see it on the Zoom call, most likely. And then, yeah, I normally do a podcast on a show called Pintu Pro Wrestling Podcast, which is kind of on a hiatus. But if you want to follow that, see if we end up bringing that show back at some point, it's at Pin Podcast. And I'm working with my good buddy Floyd, where I think I'm going to be doing an AEW-related podcast with him pretty soon. So be sure to follow me on Twitter to see when that's coming up. So
yeah, and I'll put all those links in the description below if you want to see that. Austin, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. You have really great mind for these things, and we can't wait to see where you go with that.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.